I was fired on a church staff in June of 2021. He said, we have to terminate your worship residency. I am so tired of people saying, oh, well, like, people hurt you. The church didn't hurt you. Let me take a sip of water. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Gabrielle, and today I have a really important story to share with you, one that has been on my heart since it happened last year in June. I've really toyed with it, and I've really prayed for quite a lot of months about the right thing to say, the right thing to do, and I feel like now is the perfect time to share my story with you guys, because just through meeting people in real life and through social media, on TikTok especially, after sharing parts of my story, it really has resonated with me that a lot of people have been through a similar experience as me, and I just simply want to bring awareness today to what happened to me, and then at the end I will kind of share my perspective on where I'm at now, mentally, spiritually, everything, and kind of my perspective in retrospect on everything that has happened. Because it's definitely a lot different now than it was even like a year ago, and a lot of that has to do with just the spiritual growth that I've personally experienced. So with no further ado, I want to open up and share the story with you guys. I'm gonna have to take a deep breath. I'm a little bit nervous and I'm scared that I might accidentally say someone's name, so I am going to try my hardest not to do that. I was fired from my role on a church staff in June of 2021. There were a lot of events surrounding that, but I first want to give context to the why and the how. In 2020, I graduated from Liberty University. My degree was in music and worship, and my minor was graphic design, and I was so excited to finally start a job in the real world and like be a grown-up and all of that. So I knew that I was called to be in Charlotte, and I knew that there was a calling of worship on my life from the Lord that he had given to me in high school. So I looked for worship residency jobs in Charlotte, and I found one at a local church, and I was so excited, and I immediately hopped on a Zoom call a few days later with two of the pastors from that church. And I didn't feel like I was ready for a worship director role yet, but I knew that I was ready for something new, to learn and to grow in the Lord and through other people. So I applied, I interviewed, I got accepted into the job, and part of the interview process was a questionnaire. I'm sorry to any family that may be listening to this. I'm very sorry. But there was, I believe, a 16 question sheet that I had to fill out, and it was very detailed about my sexual history. And honestly, that should have been my first red flag. I don't think that a church should inquire into your sexual history in that much detail, but I digress. We can get into that later. And so, of course, I checked everything no, because, you know, as a woman in ministry, it's hard enough being a woman in ministry, much less sharing personal struggles that you are going through with pastors that are literally hundreds of miles away that you've never met in person before. So, to give that context, Austin and I did struggle with premarital sex for a couple of years before we got married. And, you know, I went through a season when that first started happening where, like, I was heartbroken all the time, and I was crying and I was upset. And then I went through probably about a year where I was, like, really stone cold. My relationship with the Lord, like, was not good. I remember, like, getting to the end of that year and praying, like, Lord, please begin to, like, break my heart for what breaks yours again, because I'm not okay with, like, this sin struggle being a part of my life anymore. So all of that started to happen about 5 months before I applied for this job. So things did start getting a lot better in Austin and I's relationship at this time. But still, like, it was a struggle, and it wasn't something that I was about to open up about to people that I didn't know at all. Fast forward, in September, I lived with an amazing host family, and they were so kind and gracious, and I started my worship residency. I truly did learn so much from the pastors who were directing me, who was my direct boss, and other people too who were really pouring into me and influencing me, and I'm really, really grateful for all of them. But as time went on, a lot of things were shifting in my personal life, and I started noticing some red flags within that church, but I was so blind and naive, and I thought it was the best church that I'd ever been at, and I would literally tell people that, but I really was so naive to everything going on behind the scenes. So this does not directly pertain to the story, but I do remember in my first 2 weeks noticing that some information that I had told one particular person got back to another person, and it came up in a one-on-one meeting with that individual, and I remember thinking, dang, that's really weird, like I didn't tell that person that information. So again, it was another red flag of saying like, okay, this confidential information that I've shared has been leaked to someone else, and like, why was it leaked? It shouldn't have been. So that was my first red flag. Second red flag was my direct boss. I shared with him the story that I had shared with someone else. Again, I have a lot of respect for him and his family, so I'm not trying to say anything negatively, but I will say that this experience was very negative for me. So basically, I had a supporter who got offended that I had posted a picture of myself in a crop top on Instagram and that my belly button was showing. And they stopped supporting me, and they questioned whether I was like even having a strong relationship with the Lord because they posted a picture of myself in a crop top. That is just absolutely appalling to me, the fact that you think you can judge someone's spiritual walk based on what they're wearing in a photo on Instagram. It's not like I don't post trashy photos, my boobs aren't hanging out, my butt's not hanging out. Like, I post stuff that's tasteful, and that outfit I was really proud of, and it's 2 years ago and I still remember it to this day. So that was my second red flag. When this happened, I shared this experience with him. He proceeded to go through my entire Instagram account. Like, we sat down together, and he told me like what photo I should remove and what photos were okay based on whether or not I was looking at the camera. I remember one photo, he literally said because I was looking away from the camera that it was like objectifying, versus another one that was pretty similar as far as like if I was in a bathing suit or whatever it was, that it wasn't objectifying because I was engaged with the camera. And I'm like, how much of a twisted mindset do you have to think that to yourself of someone who is brand new to your staff, who you barely know? So that was definitely a red flag that I should have paid a lot more attention to. So as this is going on, I really did not share my sin struggle with anyone at this church for the first couple of months because I didn't know anyone. It didn't feel like a safe space. I was just trying to fit in and grow spiritually. Austin and I were long distance. He was in Virginia, I was in Charlotte, and so it was just all kind of a lot. I remember at the beginning of November, I did share with one of my very best friends, still to this day, that Austin and I had struggled with stuff, but it was getting a lot better, and it was something that was really important to me, that I was really convicted about. And she was really kind and like loving and just like everything that someone should be who is having sensitive information shared with him, because it wasn't something that I was proud of. I had told other people things in the past and it had gotten around, and so I really felt like I could trust her when weeks and months went by and she didn't tell anyone, and I was like, I have a true friend because she didn't talk to anyone about this. Fast forward into the spring, where things started getting interesting. I started doing a Bible study with the same friend on 1 Peter. And it was the first time I had really done a Bible study with girls my age since high school, and I really was learning so much and loving being in that community. In April, me and one of my other friends had started meeting like once a week just to catch up and discuss the Bible. At work, we would go outside to the picnic tables. It really felt like a safe space. So one day I was sharing the 1 Peter Bible study with her that I had been doing, and there was a question at the bottom that said, what is a sin that should have been like long in the past for you, like left in the past a long time ago? In that moment, like, I did not have to tell her that Austin and I were struggling. I had already told my other two close friends, and so it wasn't like I needed to confess that. Like, my mom knew, other people knew, like it wasn't a like super hidden thing. But I really felt like the Holy Spirit was growing me and stretching me and leading me to share that with her. And I was like, hey, you know what? Something for me that I feel like should have been left in the past a long time ago is the fact that Austin and I struggle sexually. And you know, it's not very often that we do anymore, but when it is, it's like still present in our relationship. And you know, we're engaged, we're going to be married in like a year and a half, and I really don't want this to be a part of our relationship at all anymore. And we've been doing better for a couple of months, and I would just really love your support in this. And for a couple of weeks she was extremely supportive, and again, this isn't bashing her either, because I have tons of respect for her, and I have since talked, and I forgive her, and we've moved on and all of that. But I do want to share this story with you guys in case you've been through something similar. So my birthday was on a Sunday, and it was just kind of a rough day. I was kind of sad that day for no reason, and I got to work the next day, and this friend and my other best friend pulled me aside, and the friend that I had shared this with, we'll say friend one, what I was doing the Bible study with outside of work, at the picnic tables. So she basically told me that if I didn't tell my boss that I was struggling sexually with Austin by the end of the day, that she was going to tell him for me. And my other friend two, kind of intervened in this situation and said, hey, you know, like, maybe give her some breathing room, like maybe wait till tomorrow, or maybe she could share with someone else first that's, you know, a bit easier to open up to, maybe a woman. I really appreciated her intervening in that situation, because I was really just kind of shocked and I didn't know what to say, and I felt threatened. And I had shared with her because obviously I wanted to change and grow, but I didn't know that I was going to be like threatened to tell certain people by a certain time of day or anything. And yeah, so I can't remember if it was her or someone else, but they told me I had to tell 3 other pastors, like, on top of this. To make a long story short, I did share with my boss. I wasn't ashamed to tell him because I knew that he would be, like, full of grace, but at the same time, I kind of felt like I was letting him down in a way, because maybe he had this certain standard in his mind of, like, who I was as a worship leader, which I feel like is what a lot of worship leaders struggle with, is public image and not being perceived in a certain way. I was supposed to lead worship that weekend on my own, and he was like, for the first time, like, I had organized all the band and the songs and everything and the scripture, and he was like, do you, like, still, like, feel comfortable with that? Like, have you prayed about it? Like, what are your convictions? And I was like, yeah, like, I feel good. And so he let me do it, and I don't know, I felt like the outcome of the situation was going to be a lot different. I then had to share with the youth pastor and the director of ministries. I think that was his role at that church. And the youth pastor, so kind, so gracious, so loving. And I will never forget it. Like, that's how it should be. Like, when someone confesses something to you that they didn't have to tell you, and they genuinely want help and they want to change, you should meet that person with grace and love and acceptance and forgiveness, and, like, put things in place to help them. So I was really thankful for that conversation. And then I had to tell the director of ministries, and it's not that he wasn't gracious and loving and all of that, and, you know, he even shared, like, a analogy with me that was helpful, but it's the fact that I was put into these positions alone as a woman, having to have an intimate conversation about my sexual history with 3 men, 2 of which I was not even that close with, and they didn't even really know anything else about me other than that. And then the pastor of Residencies, I met up with him at a Starbucks, and we literally walked around this shopping center for 2 hours. Like, how sketchy is that? That's not okay. And, you know, just having to share, like, really personal details with him, and he even shared personal details of his life that, quite frankly, like, I don't feel like were appropriate. Basically, he told me not to even be with Austin. And I was like, but you literally have spent no time investing in me as a person since I started this residency. We went out to lunch 1 time. You don't know who I am. You don't know anything about me. It was just really disappointing. What happened was, after I had shared with all of those people, it was towards the end of May, and I was just, like, really going through a lot at that point in time. I want to say it was, like, the 3rd weekend in May when I led worship alone. And then they told me that they were gonna confer, like, all the pastors and kind of come up with some way to help me, like, put in a system in place. If I had known the way things would turn out, if I knew that it wasn't the best church that I had ever been at, if I knew that I wasn't in a safe space to share my sin struggles and, like, be helped in moving forward, I think I would have gone about things a lot differently. I don't know what the outcome would have been, but at the end of the day, I was following what the Holy Spirit told me to do. So went to the beach with my family, came back. First few weeks of June were kind of weird. The worship pastor took me off. I was on like almost every single weekend on the schedule, either singing or playing keys, because you know it was the summertime, people are on vacation, and he was leaving, so there was just, you know, a lot going on. He took me off of the schedule for both of the months, and I was like, hey, should I like still keep myself off of the schedule, or like what's going on? He just said, yes, go ahead, like take yourself off. And I was like, what? And those were the only text message conversations we had about it. He didn't give me any context for it whatsoever, and I was left completely in the dark. Here I am being vulnerable, opening up to these 4 men that I don't even know all of them very well, other than what I've seen publicly, and same for me, like they barely knew me. I wish that that would never happen to my worst enemy, because no one deserves to be treated like that. For 3 weeks, they scheduled 2 meetings with me and canceled both of them with no explanation whatsoever. And I was so confused and just really hurt, because obviously things take time, but like you should at least communicate, like keep me in the loop and say, hey, we're still working on a plan, or hey, we're doing this. But it would just be like, oh, we've got to reschedule at the last minute because they forgot that they had something going on. And this was the Residency's pastor, and I was like, that's so unprofessional. Don't make a meeting if you're going to have to cancel it at the last minute. Weeks go by, VBS comes, or Kids Fest, or whatever you want to call it. I volunteered all week. I helped with the lesson plans. I helped set up. Like, me and all my friends in the residency did the same thing, and it was a lot of fun. But still, I was like left in the dark, and people started coming up to me and asking like, hey, when are we gonna see you like singing on Sunday again? And I was like, I don't know, like your guess is as good as mine, because no one's communicated with me. I have no idea. So on June 17th, I think, they were like, hey, we want to meet with you really quick. I think they had scheduled it the day before. So VBS ended around 12 o'clock. I was pulled into an office with the worship pastor, who was my direct oversight, the residency's pastor, and the operations director, who is a woman. So it was good that they had a woman in the room with me. I will condone them for that, because up until that point I felt very unsafe in these situations. So basically, the residency's pastor starts talking, and he starts bringing up like all of these petty things that had happened during my residency that were not only resolved with my host family, that had literally happened 9 or 10 months before, just like a miscommunication about like when I was coming and going and the dishes or groceries or like whatever it was. I became a lot more professional. I was on top of things. I was on time or early for things. I was really taking a lot more responsibility, setting up and tearing down things and reaching out to people, and just like really grooving and vibing in my role in a way that I had not felt the entire time until this point. So I had been in my residency for about 7-ish months at this point, I think. All of the issues that the residency's pastor brought up were not only petty and had already been resolved, but I knew from the way he was speaking, and maybe it's just like a women's intuition thing, that none of those were actually the reason why I was being fired. And so he sat me down and he said, we have to terminate your worship residency. And those words just kind of like hit me like a ton of bricks, because I never in a million years thought that that would be the outcome. I thought that I was going to get love and support, since I had chosen to come forward, and I wanted accountability and all of that. I just was not met with that at all. It really, really sucks. There's so many parts to it that infuriate me, so many layers that I could get into that I may not even remember in this video. So then my worship pastor started talking, and I don't even remember what he said. I was just like blacked out at this point. I was so nervous. I was like hyperventilating and crying and just so distraught, because I not only felt like my career was hanging in the balance, but I felt like my identity, like who I was hanging in the balance, and my supporters, like what was I going to tell them, because it was completely financially supported by other people, my salary at the time. So there was just so many factors. And so he started talking, and I just couldn't stop crying, and I asked for a hug, and I didn't even know what to say. I was so shocked. They offered to pay me for the 3 months after that and offered to pay for 10 counseling sessions, which I never took them up on. I was going to, but then I just got to a point where I was like, I don't want their money. Like, I don't want to be associated with them. I don't want to have to communicate with them. I don't want anything to do with them. So in the days that followed, I really tried to piece it together in my mind. I also forgot to say that when I was leaving the office after this happened, I was so emotionally distraught that I couldn't even see where I was going. Like, driving down the road, I had so many tears in my eyes. I pulled out, and someone pulled out before they were supposed to. They ran a light, and I almost got completely sideswiped, and I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I talked to a few of my friends after that because I had arranged to meet up with someone, and she was helpful, but I was just so mentally distraught that I didn't know what to do. So I had my parents meet me halfway between Raleigh and Charlotte, and I rode in my mom's car the whole way home, and my dad drove my car like all the way back to Raleigh, and I stayed with them for an entire week. I was in such a bad place. I didn't know how to cope. And I will never forget, after this week went by, I came back for my final exit interview. And there were a couple of things that the Residency's pastor said to me that stood out that I would love to share with you guys. The first thing is that he said, if at all possible, try not to share this experience with other people, unless they really ask, and I remember thinking, I'm sorry, what? You don't want me to share my story? You want me to keep it quiet so that you look good? No, I'm not going to do that. So the other thing that he said that made me realize that it was related to me confessing my sin is, he said, at the end of the day, when we look at everything as a whole picture, we just have to go back to last year in April when you submitted the questionnaire, basically about my sexual history with the 16 questions. And the truth of the matter is you lied on that, so. And I'll never forget looking at him and saying, wow, that's really sad. I wish you could judge me based on my character right now, because I chose to bring this sin into the light. And so it just is really sad that you're choosing to look at my character how it was over a year ago, because I'm completely different, and I would have never shared this with you a year ago, but it just shows growth and maturity. So that was great. That's the main story of everything that happened. They proceeded to force me to work for 3 days after my exit interview, so it was super awkward in the office, and I had to pack all my stuff and do the walk of shame to my car. I kept going to that church a couple of times on and off for the next 2 months because I didn't know where else to go. And I loved my community group too, so I did go 1 or 2 times after that, but it just became so awkward, with people asking me, what are you doing now? What's your role? When are we going to see you on the worship team again? Because no one freaking communicated anything. And even my boss, the only thing he sent to the worship team was Gabrielle is choosing a different path right now, or something like that. And that's what they made me say. I had to record a video to send to my supporters, and I was forced to say basically, God's just calling me in a different direction, and that's not even true. And I was so confused at the time because I wanted to share my story. I felt like I was being silenced, and at the same time, I didn't know who was safe to share the story with, and who was going to gossip about it behind my back. All of my friends were extremely kind and supportive of me during that really hard time, but basically I ended up realizing, and through talking with Austin too, that we did not want to stay at a church that treats people like that. And I can only imagine how this is going to repeat itself, and that's what keeps me up at night sometimes, because I think about another young girl fresh out of college, so excited for her first worship residency or whatever it is, and she struggles too because she's human and she wants to come forward and confess something and get real help and accountability, and she's met with not only being fired but basically being treated like crap by everyone around her, and almost exiled in a way. And no one, especially a woman in ministry, should ever be treated like that. And so this is the next bit that I will say. I want to just talk about men and women in ministry, and then I want to talk about my perspective in retrospect. The biggest thing that bothered me the whole time is I know good and well that if a man, even some that I personally know, were to come forward and share this, that they would be met with so much grace and acceptance and love, because it's like, oh, so amazing for a man to be vulnerable and share his sin struggles, and of course will I get you the accountability you need, bro, like, oh, we love you so much. But when a woman does it, it's like she has a scarlet letter, like she's damned to hell because she's a harlot, basically. And it's like, that's not the case. Like, do you think I ever wanted that to happen, number one? No. Do you think I wanted that to be a part of my testimony? No, but it is. And like, there's so much grace and forgiveness no matter what we've done in the past. And that is what the Bible teaches. So I'm just not understanding where your values are aligning when you're going to fire someone for confessing their sin. Okay, thank you. So we could talk about this Bible verse really fast. It's Matthew 18, verse 15 through 17, which says, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother, but if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church, and if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector." And it's so interesting to me because, well, A, my sin wasn't against anyone in that vicinity. It was against God and against myself and against Austin. But it's interesting because this situation could have been handled so much differently, right? Like, they could have said, hey, we are going to, just let you take a break from worship leading for right now to disciple you for the next 2 or 3 months. We are going to suspend you for the next 2 or 3 months or something like that, so we can help you mature and grow and get the accountability that you need and see real lasting change in your spiritual and physical and emotional life. Also, when I told the people that I did, it could have been kept between those people and they could have helped me accountability wise. It's just really fascinating to me that that is not what took place. I also want to add here, when I was talking about red flags at the beginning, so many other red flags began to unfold just in people's attitudes and true colors being shown. The Residency's pastor would tell us, me and my friend, oh, I so support women in ministry. Yes, I want them to be the champions and pioneers of the future and all of this, and he wanted me to be a part of that. But it was like, at every turn, I felt like he contradicted himself through his subtle undertones in the way that he would speak about men versus women, or even the decisions that he would choose to make and who he would elevate in certain circumstances. Another Bible verse that I would love to share with you guys is Galatians 6, 1 verse 2, which says, "Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." I think it's important to read that and look at where it says, restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Firing someone and leaving them kind of out to the wolves and really treating them like crap is not restoring in gentleness. It's just not. Anyways, the last little bit that I will say in retrospect, God does have a plan, and ultimately that church was so toxic in multiple ways. Many people that I love and care about have since left, and I think it was really all God's providence. Do I think that the humans in the situation handled it correctly? No. I think they could have gone about it a lot differently, and I hope that they do in the future when someone else is in that situation. However, for me personally, I do feel like it was God's hand removing me from an extremely dangerous and toxic environment, and ultimately leading me into a place where I would just be so reliant on not only his voice, but where he's leading me. And over the last year, my life has changed so much. I've probably had 6 or 7 jobs. I have done so many different things, and I can talk about that in a different video if you want, but each job has taught me something about myself, something about what I'm passionate about, something about other humans and how they love each other or love God, or so many different layers. It's taught me what I don't like and how to stand up for myself, and when enough is enough, and when I'm not being treated fairly, and all of these things. And all that is crucial, and I never ever would have had that. I probably never would have left that church if God hadn't literally ripped me out of it, because as I said, I was going around being like, oh, it's the best church I've ever been to. Since then, I've made my own goals for myself, and I also want to make another video about this, about my goals from this past year and what I've been able to accomplish and what I didn't get to. But I've really read scripture more this year than I ever have. Have I read it every single day? No. But there used to be times where I would go like 1 or 2 months without reading the Bible at all, just because it wasn't a part of my daily practice, and I would get distracted and I would get busy and I didn't make it a priority. And it's like, how do you expect to be a worship leader without making it a part of your daily life? I feel like I've learned so much about myself spiritually this year, and how to be a better wife, a better daughter and sister and friend, and how to intentionally care for people. And all of that has been thanks to having a change in my life, having a great boss now at my current job. Hello, Adair, if you're watching this. Really, since we started going to our new church, I have felt renewed. I felt passionate about scripture. I felt passionate about connecting with other believers. And I have genuinely felt like every single sermon, God used the pastor and wrote it for me, because it's spoken to exactly what I was thinking every single week for over a year now. And even the worship, I'm like, okay, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, in a place that values people and respects them and wants to know their sin struggles, to walk that out with them and to actually help them, help their mental health, help their physical health, help their spiritual health. It's like all of these things work together, and we have to pay attention to that. Like, even just like our diet and like what goes into our body, like what we consume on a daily basis, whether it's in entertainment or food or like whatever, all of that plays into our spiritual life, and it's so important. So all of those things I've been able to learn, and I'm genuinely so grateful for the people that I met at that old church and the friends that I still have from it. But I just wanted to share this with you because I don't think that this should ever occur, and there's so many double standards within church and within like men versus women being in different roles, and what different churches say is okay and what's not okay, versus like a man being a pastor of a different organization versus a woman just being like a leader or a director or whatever. Don't even get me started. The last thing I want to say is I am so tired of people saying, oh, well, like, people hurt you. The church didn't hurt you. Okay, listen. The church did hurt you, because it's made up of people who were in the church, creating the church. And the system is flawed, and it continues to hurt people who come to it looking for redemption and healing and all of these things. And we continue to push people away because of how hateful and disgusting we've been for decades. To tell someone who has been through a traumatic church experience that, oh, the people hurt you, not the church, it's like, how invalidating to say that to someone. Like, you are not actually listening to what they're saying. At least you must not be. Because if you were, you would realize that both things hurt them. The people and the system. The system is broken and it needs to be fixed. It needs to be a space where people can come forward. Because why do you think, and I literally said this a year and a half ago to my friends, I said, why do you think that pastors are in roles for 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden one day it all spontaneously combusts because they have all of these hidden sins that they have not felt comfortable to come forward to someone to tell them to get help, when they could have gotten help 15 years ago, but they didn't feel like it was a safe space to open up. And so now their church is destroyed, their family is destroyed, their reputation, their legacy, their preaching legacy, all of that completely obliterated because they didn't feel safe decades ago to share. Why do you think that this continues to happen? To worship leaders, to famous pastors, to people that aren't famous. It happens over and over, and it's because we've created this like taboo like thing where people cannot share what they're actually going through without facing so much condemnation. Instead, they should be met with love and accountability and help and like community. But we don't see that as much in Christian society. So I hope that you have either resonated with this or you've been entertained by this story. I hope that this never happens to you, but if it has, I would absolutely love to know your experience in the comments below. I would love, love, love to validate you and make you feel important and make you feel like your story is being heard by someone and not just turning a blind eye to it. So if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I would love to do more of these videos, even interviewing some of my friends to talk about some of the struggles that they've been through, and really just talking more about men and women in church and biblical roles and all of that. I would love to get into that tea. So yeah, like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for hearing my story and taking time out of your day to listen to me. I love you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!